Right, okay, so we're just going to get into this without any kind of an intro, just because of the gravity of what I would like to talk about. Netflix released a docuseries called The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. I'm going to pause right there and throw up a quick content warning for anyone who is or isn't familiar. We are going to be talking about the Elisa Lam story, although I will actually stray as far away from mentioning her name and details of the story as possible, given the fact that it's been taken so drastically out of proportion by the public sphere, and it's been laden so heavily by conspiracy theorists. Although by nature of talking about the docuseries, there will be mentions of death and drowning, so tread lightly. What I specifically want to talk about is the fact that this docuseries is trash. There's really no gentle way to say this. And I'm coming at this someone who has gone through trauma, and then someone who actually in real life as a solo team does their own documentary filmmaking and cultural preservation work on exhibit and fine arts galleries and museums and things like that. I do know how to put stories and such together on film when I have adequate equipment available to me. I'm not totally coming out of left field here. Specifically why I'm calling this docuseries trash, and forgive my nervous laughter, is Netflix is completely using this story for clickbait effectively. The series is broken down into 4 segments. Allow me to save you time. It isn't until that 4th and final segment that, to anyone who has followed this story of the untimely accidental death, and yes, it is an accidental death. It had nothing to do with foul play, nothing to do with murder, nothing to do with ghosts or anything like that. Half an hour remaining of that 4th and final episode, that the post-production decisions that were made allow the chips to fall into the board, that we as viewers come to understand what happened to this young woman. Actually, I don't even think I want to talk about how she died, because that isn't the point. The point of it is that the story of this young woman entered the mainstream through law enforcement trying to seek help through crowdsourcing to solve what was then a missing persons case back in about 2013 or so right after I graduated high school. I'll be honest, when I first heard about this, and I was one of those people who totally fell into the trap of this is foul play, not because I had gone to any sort of a valuable, relevant, or credible source, but because YouTuber upon YouTuber was coming up with all these outlandish claims and speculations with no credentials, right? No one doing any of these analyses were authoritative figures on any of the topics. And effectively what was created was community after community of true crime to conspiracy theory to people genuinely concerned about this woman, of just people on the internet who were distracting law enforcement from actually solving this case. And the team at Netflix knows this because it is something that is repeatedly brought up, the interviews in the docuseries. However, the way in which they format their docuseries does nothing but continue to perpetrate those conspiracies. When we meet the cast, so to speak, we have the manager at the time of the Cecil Hotel. We have the pair of law enforcement officers who are actively taking lead in to find the missing woman. And then for some reason, by proxy of being the most prevalent out of all the people interviewed, there is a YouTuber who is effectively the narrator, who is the most interviewed out of everyone. And it's not even as though he is the first to have broken the story on the platform. He even admits, the name escapes me, but admits seeing it on someone else's channel. And there's also a couple who was staying at the hotel at the time, who was interviewed at the time of the incident and then is interviewed again looking back their experience. There is also a self-proclaimed web sleuth. And so it's that web sleuth and the YouTuber who are the conspiracy theorists. And it's never really pointed out what their mindset is like. What Netflix effectively does is, instead of giving you a factual account of an unfortunate accidental death, or even a documentary about a missing persons case, which they have done in the past with other missing person cases. They do this razzle dazzle, dramatic, suspenseful music with this blurry extra who's meant to vaguely look like the woman, dancing in the background and just playing on all of these tropes of mental illness as they read aloud her old Tumblr posts. It kind of reminds me actually of if you had either seen, unfortunately, the Shane Dawson Jake Paul is a Sociopath miniseries and or the critiques about those videos, in basically how he was artificially creating the sense of overdramatics and fear and making even the most passive comments these over-the-top theatrical things with the stock footage equivalent of like B-grade horror movie clips or dramatic renditions of royalty-free music. I mean, I really can't stress enough the theatrics and the dramatics, both of that and then also what appears here in this docuseries, whether it's something like the ticking of a clock as we're seeing each of these conspiracy theorists unravel what they think happened with no foundation for 3 episodes. And so it's the way it's portrayed, with them cutting between the different conspiracy theorists and then also as law enforcement is going through their twists and turns and struggles. Netflix actually does it in a way to make you think that one of these 2 people is going to end up with the right conclusion. But that's not the case. Ultimately, what ends up happening is their illusion is shattered basically because of a latch on a water tank being open at the time of discovery and that being misreported. And it's only then that the 2 of them come to terms, at least in the interviews and at least in terms of how Netflix presented it. Because again, we don't know what the order of the interviews were. What order questions were asked. We don't know if leading questions were asked. We don't know if it was a stream of conscious interview. But at least as it's presented, it's not until that last half hour of that 4th episode that suddenly they wake up and literally realize, oh, this is actually a person. This person actually has family and friends who are mourning them. And that's just so fantastically horrible. I just did some quick digging regarding the documentary because one of the most poignant absences of everything is the fact that no one from the victim's family is actually present or giving their account, despite law enforcement providing quotes and context from conversations with them. So I wondered if this was actually unsanctioned by the family. And from what I can tell, it looks like it was, or at least that they did not want to participate. There is an article by Entertainment Weekly, unfortunately, so not the greatest source. The interviewer actually says, quote, "Friends and families did not participate in your docuseries. If they changed their minds and were willing to talk to you one day, would you revisit the case?" We don't have the whole transcript here. That just generally comes off as problematic because even though I don't have the whole transcript, it literally sounds like this reporter was told by the creative team that the individuals closest to the victim were unwilling to participate. So why did you go through with this?
Hey, editing me here. I know, just with the best audio and camera quality. What I meant to say last night, but it was really late, it's really important that in situations like this, we do not create false equivalencies. And by that, I mean, my gripe, as I've tried to explain it, is that this is a deeply traumatic situation for those who are involved personally. And that's very different than if Netflix were to create a documentary about climate change. You know, they don't have to interview Al Gore about it. They don't have to interview every single person who has been affected and will be affected on it. Even if they were to do a documentary on Yankee Stadium, you know, they don't necessarily have to get the Yankees' permission for that. It can be totally about the architectural components of it or the cultural and social, you know, meaning towards the fans. It probably would be nice to have some Yankees featured, but it's not absolutely necessary. It's the scale and the gravity and the depth of the situation. Again, not coming out of left field. This is as someone who, and I hate toting this around, but as someone who had 2 degrees, who's had to complete a significant amount of research to be able to complete those degrees. So I understand having to work with institutional review boards and data protection and the protection of technically human subjects, even if you were to just do a survey or film interviews as the basis for collecting some of this research. So this is the kind of thing where I actually think the documentary should have been made at all. There are plenty of other mysteries and even true crime or disappearances where I'm sure families would be highly interested in participating that could have been made instead.
Why did you rehash all these traumatic experiences for them? Why did you make it so that, their deceased loved one's name would be trending again? If you search the name of the documentary, you get things like 7 questions we still have about names, death after watching name of the documentary. That's like the kind of article you would expect to have come out after watching an episode of Game of Thrones. Or worse, this one from Esquire, the former Cecil Hotel manager. I believe in ghosts, but I don't think they run the show. How is that relevant? Why are we giving... And that actually is a direct tie-in to the conspiracy theories that there was something supernatural forcing the actions that caused this woman's death. So why are we... One, why are we indulging this type of reporting? And then 2, again, if this was in fact unsanctioned, if this did not have the support of the family especially, why are you putting them through this? Oh wait, I know. It's because Netflix wants to make money. It's because anyone wants to make money. And then that's also specifically why they put the relevant actual answers that people really wanted to know in the last half hour of the last episode. There was no reason that we needed an entire episode devoted to the GM's defense of herself in the hotel after she claimed she was just there to prove someone cared, when in fact the lack of the compassion from the GM and the hotel was used in an attempt of making a case for a wrongful death suit. There was no reason then for them to stylistically use an innocent man as a red herring that the internet had basically decided to start threatening and dogpiling on. There was no reason for half of the supposed creative decisions and the post-production decisions to have been done in the way that they were done, except for the fact that Netflix wanted to do something over the top, stylistic, that would basically draw people in and sucker them in for 4 whole episodes. It's always the engagement that is going to get any given platform their money. You even have places like Screen Rant is doing articles, again, about our burning questions and literally referring to it as questions that fans have. Why do we have fans of a woman dying? I don't think they intentionally meant to phrase it like this. This is just a hot mess. The documentary is a hot mess. The response to the documentary is a hot mess. The whole 7-8 years of coverage surrounding this case is a hot mess, and honestly, I think we really need to stop. And honestly, I don't know how, but we just can't keep using the genuine victimhood of people for clickbait and for another huge conglomerate entity or corporate entity to pad their pockets. It shouldn't be this difficult to find out that, as far as I'm aware, the family was unwilling to participate. This just totally rubs me the wrong way. And what I was supposed to be doing the past couple days is finishing up this video about what happened to Reddit story times or jumping between one I had about being chronically ill and disabled during the pandemic. I just kind of had to jump in and say something about this, even if for now it seems like it's to the void. Because why are projects like this getting greenlit? And there are other articles starting to come out now, basically also calling out this docuseries for being a hot mess, and in other ways, and there are many other ways that it is a hot mess. And it just seems like something that needs to be amplified. So that's my 2 cents. I would say, as per usual, you're welcome to disagree, but you haven't seen the month's worth of content to fit with my as per usual. So I hope you and your families or your friends all stay safe, and that tomorrow will be a better day for all of us. Have a nice night.